So the next item is the report of the Chief Executive, and I will hand over to Carleen Edwards.
Thank you. I take the report as read, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. So one is that a number of our bouquets and success in the last month. So you would have read that Anne-Marie Robinson and Linda Bennett from the communications team won the Public Relations Institute of New Zealand's Supreme Award for their project Home Truths, communicating the risks of landslide to Port Hills residents. And so now they can enter the Global Compre Award. And the Chief Judge, Anna Radford, said the project stood out among a record of 68 entries. In fact, I'll read to you what she said. With around 1,400 Port Hills homes in the affected area, the task was not small and was carried out in a very short time frame. The entrance work was thorough, thoughtful, and showed extensive handling of a fraught and complex situation. This combined with intelligent planning, excellent stakeholder analysis, and very professional yet empathetic implementation. It was about both heart and head, was the comment. But that's not the only award. The Christchurch Art Gallery won 3 Excellence Awards in the 2015 Museums Australia Publication Design Awards, or MACDAs. The gallery took top honours in 3 categories: exhibition catalogue for David Cook, McMee in the Square, for the magazine Bulletin, and the poster Booster, Flipper, Wobbler, Tripper, Dripper, Spinner, Stacker, Shaker, Maker. It's hard to say. So it's really a great result. I think it speaks volumes about the passion and pride and innovation that staff brought to every aspect of the gallery's projects, despite the building being closed. That was a comment from the director, Blair Jackson. Thirdly, Albion Square in Littleton won the Engaging Communities category of the New Zealand Community Board's Best Practice Awards. So Carolyn Bonnis, Acting Unit Manager, Urban Design and Regeneration, said that the design and implementation of Albion Square was a product of really great collaboration between the council and the community at large during both the development of the Littleton Master Plan and identification of design options for the square. So it's really a model that we should be using moving on. And of course, finally, the Canterbury Architecture Awards, the Christchurch Botanic Gardens Visitor Centre and the Hagley Oval Pavilion won well-deserved awards in the Public Architectural category last week. And so both are now eligible for National Architecture Awards. So I think it's important to recognise the work that's going on and the passion and commitment of people both in the council but also in the community boards and the rest of Christchurch in the rebuild and the work that they're doing around that. And the only other reminder is that the FIFA Under-20s World Cup, New Zealand 2015, between May 30th and 20th of June, and Councillor Johansson has been meeting some of the teams arriving, but it's really the most significant global football tournament Christchurch has ever seen, with the first local game kicking off next Monday. So it actually is a really exciting event for Christchurch in terms of the input that we'll have in around that, and is worth participating in. Happy to take any questions about my actual report.
Glenn, then Yanni, then Jimmy, David.
Thank you, Carleen. I think it's wonderful that the staff won that award, and sometimes our staff achievements fly under the radar, but we're all quite well aware of how hard they work, and we've seen this through the LTP process, and sometimes they're not always thanked. So I think it's great that we, can acknowledge that today. I'm sure we all support that. Just got a couple of questions, just on page 19 and 29, a reference to procurement work streams. Just curious if you're able to speak to that a little bit more, and also over the anything that's come out of asbestos there with the government's released report, anything that's starting to raise its head?
So in terms of the procurement work stream, that's part of our Great for Christchurch. So the executive team approved a work program going, starting with procurement, because there's some very easy wins in there, and have also just approved 2 other parts, customer and community focus, and middle and back office. But in the procurement area, there are already some significant savings that have been made by renegotiating some of the contracts around photocopying, it saves about $1 million a year. So the procurement and the organisation has worked quite hard on some of those, and another around some of the parks maintenance has also made savings as well. And so we have a program of activity to look at all of those areas and where we can make savings, but it also improves the contract management and the objectives around some of the contracts as well.
Yanni?
A number of questions. Thank you for your report. Just under the skirt and wastewater network rebuild, obviously we've got the horizontal infrastructure review. Can you just tell us when that's going to be publicly released and what communications we'll have in place around those wastewater overflows?
Should I perhaps interject here, because we're talking to the Minister's office at the moment about putting a joint release out, so it should be today or tomorrow, so it's not far away.
Right, okay. And what's the message, what's the key message around the wastewater overflows, given the information we've had back that wastewater flows through the wastewater treatment 60% higher? There's a risk that the network rebuild will not achieve equal or better than previous overflow frequencies. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we're waiting to June 2016 to do the modelling.
But there's still testing that's going on at the moment and work around that. So that's part of, again, a greater program around the waste and environmental management team that are doing, and I think there's identified in there some of the work that's happening.
But so people will know when that review's released where the extent of the damage is that won't be fixed in terms of the wastewater pipes?
Yeah, so largely the fixes are around where there are big areas of damage. If there are small areas of damage, then there's usually a possibility of continuing to use those pipes rather than replacing the whole lot. So the videos can actually tell us where those are.
And I guess in simple terms, what I want to understand is, in terms of the waiting to the end of the skirt repair to know where the gaps are, with all the money being committed, how do we know that the areas that are causing these overflows are being addressed through the skirt process as compared to what we might spend in a long-term plan?
Well, there's a prioritisation process, and where we identify the big issues, then they'll be the ones that are urgently looked at as opposed to the smaller issues.
Okay, and just the second question on the asbestos demolition waste and dust management. I know that we've just again had the same information that we keep getting back. So every time we get a natural environment recovery program update, when we ask about asbestos, we keep getting told the same thing. But we're also being told that there's continuously new sites in the central city where they're experiencing issues, like the Justice and Emergency Precinct, I think the bus interchange, and I think the metro. So I'm just interested in why we keep getting told the same information, but we still have the same problems time and time again. So is there any strategic look at what's causing these issues in the first place and what we need to do differently to actually stop them from becoming issues?
So we'll identify those issues, asbestos, when they start to develop those areas and have to remediate the land. So I'm not sure specifically what you're asking for about what we would do differently. Well,
Metro Sports is a really good example. So it wasn't until the hospital put the car park on that we even discovered it had asbestos in it. So why wasn't that picked up at the start when the buildings were being demolished, and why wasn't enforcement taken or monitoring taken when the buildings were cleared to find out that the asbestos was there and then be treated? Why did it take several months for it to even become an issue?
Well, I can't answer that. I'm not sure what the process is, except that there is the proactive visits to all sites and the work that happens. So when there's demolitions happening, there's certainly monitoring to check for things such as asbestos.
Except it wouldn't appear that that's working if these cases are still being reported.
But so perhaps they're being reported because there is monitoring.
But there's a time delay.
I think it's a process of understanding and investigating the different sites.
That's okay. I'll talk to you offline about it. And just the final question from me is the The capital program will not be spent on page 20. Only 37% of the planned budget has been expended. That's pretty extraordinary. Are we going to get any kind of fuller information around what's not actually going to be complete, and when are we going to get that? Because obviously today on the agenda we've got some requests for spending of some capital on some projects that are ready to go ahead, and it would be really helpful to know, particularly in terms of making substitutions so that things can happen rather than being carried forward.
So there is a list of projects that are generally timing delays. About a third of the projects are outside of our control, so they're around skirt managed or around the anchor projects, but our contribution to those shared projects may actually be within the next financial year. So that funding will be carried forward around that. And then there are delays in some of the other areas around community facilities, which you know about, or the art gallery or housing, due to a number of reasons, including things such as waiting for insurance receipts or delay or difficulties or complexities around those rebuilds. So I'm fairly sure that the list comes regularly to the committees. And it's certainly available.
But it will be available as part of the LTP, and I've asked for staff to. I will ask for staff to. I have asked for staff to be available to answer the question in relation to whether there is funding available for the project that you're referring to.
Great. Thank you.
Jimmy.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions. First one on page 20 regarding to the level of service for the performance report. In here, the figure is the 85%. However, I'm not sure that because yesterday council issued, the kind of overall satisfaction with the council service performance from the residents. This kind of is only the 65%. So there's a gap. I mean, why have this bigger gap, and what's a strategic we can narrow this gap?
Yeah, so there are two different things. One is our levels of service, which cover the whole range of things that we deliver, and we set that at 85%. So that's the targets out of the activity management plans, for instance. Of which one would be resident satisfaction and also our staff engagement. They're some of the figures. So what that will mean is that because we didn't reach our target around resident satisfaction, that will drop down meeting our target of levels of service. So that's one of probably hundreds of targets that we've got.
Second question is also on page 20 in top right corner, the capital expenditure. In here, if we review this figure, if the up to date, year to date is kind of the expenditure behind the schedule is $83.5 million, and overall the full year is $107.4 million. However, we review in here in the middle part in here, council consider only $91 million underspent will be carried forward. Where about the rest of 16 millions? And also, I would like to follow the Councillor Yanni the question. What is the kind of strategic way we can, to minimize this figure and to speed up the progress of the lost horizontal infrastructure?
Yeah. So if you're talking about what we need to do around capital expenditure per se, yes. So we've looked at an end-to-end process about what happens and making sure that we don't have delays that we can manage, that we're responsible for, and trying to streamline that process. The other thing is around issues such as how we monitor our capital expenditure. So you'll see that we meet our milestones there, but the milestones don't actually reflect spending the money or delivering. So that we need to review those sorts of issues. The other thing is around our forecasting in terms of what we spent. So for years, the council hasn't met its forecast expenditure and capital. So we need to make those more realistic as well in terms of what we're capable of and what capacity we have to deliver on those. I would just reinforce that some of this is outside of our control. So it's about other agencies that, such as SCIRT or Anchor Projects, and in terms of their influence and what influence we have in terms of expenditure there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. Look, firstly, I'd just like to congratulate the Chief Executive for the quality and the detail of the report. I'd just like to focus on page 26, health and safety. Mm-hmm. It is a little alarming. I think that the number of staff accidents is quite up on last year, and particularly I think my concern is that Council will be faced with the implementation of the new Health and Safety Act coming through in a few months' time. Some of its provisions are particularly draconian, particularly where, not sure whether it's going to apply to us or not, but directors, but certainly to the Chief Executive, if procedures aren't followed or we knowingly don't action to prevent incidents continuing and happening. So I'm interested to know what work is being done in Council at the moment with respect to the pending new health and safety legislation, particularly how it impacts on the Chief Executive and on us as your employers.
Thank you. I think in Australia I could go to jail. I think when I was in Australia, I could go to jail if I ignored those things. A number of things. So we're equally interested in the legislation, but more so interested in making sure that we have a healthy and safe environment for our staff to work in. So some of the increase is actually about us being better at recognising and reporting. So notwithstanding that it's not a problem to see an increase, but just recognise that these things actually happen. So that's a good thing in a sense, but it still recognises that things are happening to our staff, either in a health or safety issue. In terms of what we're doing, at the moment we're undertaking an internal audit around health and safety culture in the organisation as part of the internal audit process, and that will give us a baseline from which we're to develop a health and safety strategy for the whole organisation, which then needs to flow through to the agencies that deliver services for us as well. And with that we'll be doing some work with the councillors around what your accountabilities and responsibilities might be as well. I mean, essentially it's important that you know that we're doing something about this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I just can't emphasise strongly enough the importance of this sort of work. A couple of other organisations that I sit on as a council representative treat health and safety as a paramount issue. It's generally the first item on the agenda, and it is treated with a huge amount of respect, and I really want to see this organisation take health and safety as a very serious and important aspect to follow through. So I will be very interested to see how that pans out.
I agree with you more.
Thank you. Paul?
Just around the capital expenditure and the earthquake rebuild expenditure, and just we seem to be sort of so far behind our plan of how much we can and what we actually are spending. And I just want to know what we are going to do about bringing that back into line so we actually have some reality around our expenditure, because it seems to me year on year out that capital gap seems to get bigger. And so I just think we need to have a plan, so when we look at this here we're actually talking about realities and what we can actually achieve. Is there work being done on that?
Yes, so as I mentioned to Councillor Chen, that's exactly the work that we're doing. So it's not only about improving the way that we deliver the capital program, but it's actually about how we forecast what we actually have capacity to deliver on. So we've been over optimistic in the past, so we need to actually think about not only what we can deliver, but what can be delivered, you know, through the community, through other agencies as well. So it's a big piece of work.
Just in terms of, it'd be good to see this actually resolved, like just like next report, that we just come back to a reality.
Should we give you a summary in the next report about what's actually happening and how we're going about that?
A lot of this will be surfaced with the LTP as well. I guess that the thing that kind of threw me more than anything else was the fact that we actually didn't budget to borrow everything we'd budgeted to do because we knew we wouldn't do it all. That has been a revelation to me, an absolute revelation.
I think that's the part I was trying to flesh out for the public, so they actually understand there is a process and we aren't borrowing.
We are getting on top of it, and it was part of the resolution that we passed earlier this year that we instructed the Chief Executive to report back as part of the LTP process on a number of matters, including getting our operational expenditure down, but in addition to address the carry forwards. And actually the carry forwards are looking way better than they were looking at the beginning of this process. So we're on the way, but there's still a long way to go. But thank you for raising it. The issue I wanted to raise was the report back from the National Natural Environment Recovery Program, which was the Porritt Park update. This was an issue of concern that was raised when we had the presentation on the National Natural Environment Recovery Program, which was the potential for leasing out Porritt Park, which had been initiated by the Burwood Pegasus Community Board, potentially, well, by calling an expression of interest, but the expressions of interest having been really sparked off by the interest of the Celebration Church Lions Sports Trust. I think that the people that were running the Natural Environment Recovery Program were a little bit concerned about the location of Porritt Park as it is in the you know, in the cut behind you know, where the natural run of the river used to be, and its proximity to the residential red zone, and how inappropriate it was really to be entering into any sort of arrangement not knowing what the whole future of the residential red zone would be. So I just wanted to thank you for reporting back on that with such detail. Glenn.
Thank you, just in the board support, I have sought clarification because that wasn't mine, David's recollection. We have from the board advisor, Peter Croucher, that the board resolved to consider proceeding, not actually to proceed, but to consider proceeding. So that was taken a step further without knowledge. So
an opportunity for staff to have been proactive, I think.
Sorry?
The staff were obviously very proactive.
Yeah, let's...
And I think that, I mean, because it does raise an issue for me, which is that the community board has the power to set off a process of an expression of interest over a matter over which they don't have the final decision, because Porritt Park is a metro facility. So it would have had to have come to council anyway, and given that this council had already expressed a view that residential red zone proximity was an issue that would be taken into account in terms of any land use issues, you know, it really does highlight a problem in process overall. But you know, I'm glad that we've got this now under control, and I think we should actually report back to. I think Chrissy Williams presented on the Natural Environment Recovery Program.
We knew we didn't have the delegation to set an EOI process.
Exactly, exactly. Just well, you did have the delegation to set the EOI process. You didn't have the delegation to make the decision, and that to me is nuts in anyone's language. So hopefully that is something that we will be able to address as well. But look, thank you very much, Carleen, for that, and I'm happy to move that the report be received. You'd like to ask another follow-up question? Is it necessary?
Well, yeah, I think
Okay.
Just very quickly, do we have a date when we're expecting a report back on the Sarah transition that's raised under your report?
Which?
Just on page 27.
Which part?
It just says that the council staff continue to meet with Sarah and government officials to discuss a whole bunch of areas around Sarah transition. and ensuring a preparedness for transition is a key focus at present. I was just wondering if we had a date when we could expect a report so that we can provide some governance feedback around what's being...
We don't. We're working at a number of levels around a range of issues, and so, you know, I'm meeting on a regular basis with my counterpart, John Ombler, and other staff are meeting at other levels around details. So there isn't a date that we have.
Yeah. I mean, there will be, I mean, this is something that I feel, you know, a bit, well, yeah, conflicted over in many respects. So I've been appointed to the Transition Advisory Board. I'm on the board because I'm the Mayor of Christchurch, but not as the Mayor of Christchurch. So it's actually quite a challenging environment. So we've certainly been working very hard on developing a proposition that really is a Christchurch City-led transition process. So, you know, it seems to me that the messages that we've been getting from central government is that it is time to step back. It's time for the natural leaders of the city and the two districts to come back to the fore, and that is a process that obviously has to be worked out carefully. Now, there'll be a lot of public input into this. So the government, and you might recall, they announced publicly that as a result of their interpretation of the Supreme Court case on the Quake outcasts, that they will be proceeding as a recovery plan. So a transition recovery plan under the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act will be developed. Now that means that a discussion document or a proposed transition plan will come out into the public arena for public feedback. We will have the opportunity to input into that, and we are talking with them at the moment about what that might require in terms of ongoing powers beyond April 2015. But we did have an informal briefing for councillors on this, but I don't think you were there. But we will continue to update councillors on what we're doing, but a lot of it is about what we want to really put on the table, and it really feeds back from a lot of the comments that people made during the long-term plan. I think people would like to see the City Council play a stronger role in terms of leading the development of the central city, and I think that's a very realistic possibility.
I think just some clear communication, maybe if we can, around the two different processes that are underway and how they relate, because I do agree with you.
Actually,
we need three. We need the LERP review as well. So we need to actually be able to articulate to our communities over where the decisions will be made, who will make them, and what the time frame is so that people can be involved.
The transition recovery plan, obviously under the legislation, is something that's ultimately signed off by the Minister after taking it through Cabinet, and we're certainly promoting a stronger role for, you know, the Christchurch City interests, because I think this is the thing that that people forget. The Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act covers Christchurch City, Waimakariri District and Selwyn District. But the interests of Christchurch City are quite different from the interests of the two districts. Paul?
The land use recovery plan and the district plan, once the district plan is in place, is there actually any need for the land use recovery plan to be in place?
Well, it continues in existence, and because the Crown is legally required, the ECAN is legally required to review its operation, it's actually in the process of reviewing it at the moment. So there's a discussion paper out on that at the moment as well. So there's a lot going on. But look, I'm moving that the report be received, as seconded by Jamie. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Look, I think we'll deal